Robert E. Lee, a general, Civil War, history, fearless, loyalty. How much do you know about him? A historic film. Produced by Max Lee, JACKY. Robert E. Lee. He was born on January 19th, 1807. The place where he was born was called Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was the son of General Henry Lee III. Lee entered West Point in the summer of 1825. At the time, the focus of curriculum was engineering. On August 11, 1829, Brigadier General Charles Gratiot ordered Lee to Cockspur Island, Georgia. Plans were to build a fort on a marshy island to command the outlet of the Shavina River. But then, Lee was transferred to Fort Monroe at the tip of Virginia Peninsula. While he was stationed at Fort Monroe, he married Mary Ann Randolph Custis, great-granddaughter of Martha Washington, by her first husband Daniel Parke Custis, and step-great-granddaughter of George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. Lee distinguished himself in the Mexican-American War. He was one of the Winfield Scott's chief aides in the march to Mexico City. President James Buckman gave Lee command of detachments of militia, soldiers, and United States Marines to suppress the uprising and arresting John Brown. John Brown achieved temporary success by creating panic and confusion and by magnifying the number of participants involved in the raid. Robert E. Lee. When Texas seceded from the Union in February 1861, General David E. Twiggs surrendered all the American forces, about 4,000 men, including Lee and commander of the Department of Texas. However, Fort Manson, Texas, was Lee's last command with the United States Army. It has often been struggled that Lee was in some sense opposed to slavery. The evidence cited in favor of claim that Lee opposed slavery include his direct statements and his actions before and during the war, including Lee's support of the work by his wife and his mother to liberate slaves and found their move to Liberia. And other things prove that Lee is a man who considers slavery should not be existed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect that it will cease to be divided. Abraham Lincoln. The Civil War broke on the day of April the 12th, 1861. The 11 seceded states are now turning their back to the Union. There's nothing to do to hold it back. The war is coming. At the outbreak of war, Lee was appointed to command all of Virginia's forces, but upon the formation of the Confederate States Army, he was named one of its first 5 full generals. The Battle of Cheat Mountain. Lee directed his first offensive of the Civil War against General Joseph Reynolds' entrenchments on the summit of Cheat Mountain. The Confederate attacks were uncoordinated, and Union troops won the battle. This is Lee's first battle of the Civil War. Lee was severely criticized for the defeat and named Granny Lee. He was sent to South Carolina to supervise fortification. The 7 Days Battle. The 7 Days Battle was a series of 6 major battles over the 7 days from June the 25th to July the 1st, 1862, near Richmond, Virginia. Lee's troop with 95,000 soldiers' opponent was Union General McClellan, with almost equally 91,000 soldiers. Up to the decisive strategic Lee and his troop got victory. The first battle was called Oak Grove, and it was a draw battle. The second battle is Beaver Dam Creek, and the Union got victory. The third battle was called Gaines Mill. Lee and his troop got victory. The fourth battle was called Savage's Station. It was a draw battle. And the fifth battle was called Glendale, and it was a draw battle. And the last battle was called Malvern Hill, and the Union got victory. The second battle of Bull Run. The second battle of Bull Run was fought on August the 28th to the 30th, 1862. It was the culmination of an offensive campaign waged by Lee's Army of Northern Virginia against Union Major General John Pope's army, and a battle of much larger scale and numbers than the first Battle of Bull Run, which was fought in 1861 on the same ground. It was a victory for Lee's troop with 9,197 casualties over 49,000 troops, to the Union troops with 16,054 casualties over 76,000 troops. The Battle of South Mountain. The Battle of South Mountain, known in several early Southern accounts as the Battle of Bornsburg Gap, was fought September the 14th, 1862, as a part of the Maryland campaign of the American Civil War. 3 pitched battles were fought for possession of 3,000 mountain passes: Kempton's, Turner's, and Fox's Gaps. Major General George McClellan, commanding the Union Army of the Potomac, needed to pass through these gaps in his pursuit of Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. At last, the Union got the victory with 1,813 casualties. The Battle of Antietam. After pursuing Lee into Maryland, Union Army General McClellan launched attacks against Lee's army in defensive positions behind Antietam Creek. At dawn on September 17th was the first major battle in American Civil War to take place on Union soil. It was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, with about 23,000 casualties. Nevertheless, Lee's invasion of Maryland was ended, and he was able to withdraw his army back to Virginia without interference from the cautioned McClellan. Although the battle was technically inconclusive, it had significance as enough of a victory to give President Abraham Lincoln the confidence to announce history. The Battle of Fredericksburg. The Battle of Fredericksburg was fought on December the 15th to 11th, 1862, in and around Fredericksburg, Virginia, between General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia and the Union Army of Potomac, commanded by Major General Ambrose E. Burnside. Lee was good at using his strategy. On December the 15th, Burnside withdrew his army, ending another failed Union campaign in the Eastern Theater. The Battle of Chancellorsville. The Battle of Chancellorsville was fought from April the 30th to May the 6th, 1863, near the village of Chancellorsville. 2 related battles were fought nearby on May the 3rd in the vicinity of Fredericksburg. The campaign pitted Union Army Major General Joseph Hooker's army against an army less than half its size, General Robert E. Lee's troop. The fiercest fighting of the battle and the second bloodiest day of the Civil War occurred on May the 3rd, as Lee launched multiple attacks against the Union position at Chancellorsville, resulting in heavy losses on both sides. The campaign ended on May the 6th, when Stormant's cavalry reached the Union's lines east of Richmond. Confederate won. The Battle of Gettysburg. The critical decisions came in May to June 1863, after Lee's smashing victory at the Battle of Chancellorsville. The Western Front was crumbling, as multiple uncoordinated Confederate armies were unable to handle General Grant's campaign against Vicksburg. Lee was facing the Union General Meade. In the summer of 1863, Lee invaded the North again, marching through western Maryland and into south-central Pennsylvania. That fall, Lee and Meade meet again in 2 minor campaigns that did little to change the strategic standoff. The Confederate Army never fully recovered from the substantial loss in corps during the three-day battle in southern Pennsylvania. The historian Shelby Foote said, Gettysburg was the price the South paid for having Robert E. Lee as a commander. South lost a battle with huge casualties of about 28,000 soldiers. The Battle of the Wilderness. The Battle of the Wilderness, fought on May the 5th to the 7th, 1864, was the first battle of Grant's 1864 Virginia overland campaign against Robert E. Lee. Both armies suffered heavy casualties. On May the 7th, Grant disengaged and moved to the southeast, intending to leave the Wilderness to interpose his army between Lee and Richmond, leading to the bloody Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. The Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. The Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, sometimes simply referred to as the Battle of Spotsylvania, was the second major battle of Grant's 1864 overland campaign of the American Civil War. Following the bloody but inconclusive Battle of the Wilderness, Grant's army disengaged from Lee's army and moved to the southeast, attempting to lure Lee into battle under more favorable conditions. On May the 21st, Grant disengaged from the Confederate Army and started southeast on another maneuver to turn Lee's right flank, as the overland campaign continued toward the Battle of North End. The Battle of Cold Harbor. The Battle of Cold Harbor was fought from May the 31st to June the 12th, 1864. It was one of the final battles of Grant's overland campaign during the American Civil War, and it's remembered as one of the American history's bloodiest, most lopsided battles. Thousands of Union soldiers were killed or wounded in a hopeless frontal assault against the fortified position of Lee's army. The Battle of Appomattox Courthouse. On January 31, 1865, Lee was promoted to General-in-Chief of Confederate Forces. The Battle of Appomattox Courthouse, fought on the morning of April 9, 1865, was the final engagement of a Confederate States Army, General Robert E. Lee's troop, before it surrendered to the Union Army under General Grant, and one of the last battles of the American Civil War. Lee, having abandoned the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, after the siege of Petersburg, retreated west, hoping to join his army with the Confederate forces in North Carolina. Union forces pursued and cut off the Confederate retreat. Lee's final stand was at Appomattox Courthouse, where he launched an attack to break through the Union force in his front, assuming the Union force consisted entirely of cavalry. When he realized that his cavalry was backed up by 2 corps of Union infantry, he had no choice but to surrender. The signing of the surrender documents occurred in the parlor of the house owned by Wilmer McLean on the afternoon of April the 9th. On April the 12th, a formal ceremony marked the disbandment of the Army of Northern Virginia and the parole of its officers and men, effectively ending the war in Virginia. After the war, Lee was not arrested or punished, but he did lose the right to vote as well as some property. Lee supported President Johnson's plan of Reconstruction. Death. On September 28, 1870, Lee suffered a stroke. He died 2 weeks later, shortly after 9 a.m. on October 12, 1870, in Lexington, Virginia, from the effects of pneumonia. Robert E. Lee, a general, fearless. He fought for the side where his spirit belonged to. He fought no matter how other people say about him. He just never quit and doubt himself. It took us a while to make this film, and we learned a totally new lesson about Civil War and one of the greatest general in American history. And here is the end of the film. That's all. Thank you.